Most people think the biggest retirement mistake is not contributing enough. But for millions of workers, the more dangerous mistake is spending 20 or 30 years doing the responsible thing on autopilot, only to discover too late that they were feeding the wrong financial bucket for the life they were actually living. Every few months, the internet rediscovers the same dramatic opinion. The 401k is a scam. The government is controlling your money. You're locking up your paycheck for a future you may never even reach. You'll work your whole life, then die before you enjoy it. That kind of content spreads for one reason. Fear is easier to sell than nuance. But the real danger is not that the 401k is fake. The real danger is something quieter, more believable, and more expensive. It's doing the responsible thing for 20 or 30 years without ever asking whether you're putting your money in the right bucket for the life you're actually going to live. And for a lot of working people, that question matters more than ever. Because most middle-class households are not sitting around with piles of extra cash, wondering how to optimize tax efficiency for fun. They're trying to survive rent, groceries, insurance, childcare, medical bills, and a salary that somehow feels smaller every year, no matter how hard they work. They're trying to save for the future without making the present so fragile that one bad month blows everything up. Let's be clear, the 401k is not a scam. For millions of Americans, it has been one of the most effective long-term wealth-building tools ever created. Fidelity reported that in Q2 of 2025, the number of 401k millionaires reached about 595,000, an all-time high, while the average 401k balance rose to roughly $137,800. Fidelity also found that the average total savings rate, employee plus employer, was about 14.2%. Close to the widely cited 15% target. That didn't happen because those people found a magic stock. It happened because they contributed consistently, stayed invested, and gave compounding enough time to work. And the employer match is still one of the best deals in personal finance. If your company matches 50% or 100% of part of your contribution, that is an immediate return that normal investing simply does not offer. But here's the part almost nobody says with enough honesty. A good tool used blindly can still hurt you. That is the real conversation. Not should you fear the 401k, but where should your next dollar go based on your actual life, your taxes, your timeline, and your stress level. Sometimes the right answer is the traditional 401k. Sometimes it is the Roth 401k. Sometimes it is a Roth IRA. Sometimes it is your emergency fund. Sometimes it is killing off high-interest debt. Sometimes it is a taxable brokerage account because you need flexibility more than another lockbox. And if that sounds less exciting than the conspiracy version, good. Real financial progress is usually less dramatic and more useful. First situation. When a traditional 401k can create a future tax problem. Here's the first situation where continuing to pile money into a traditional 401k can work against you. It happens when you become such a disciplined saver that you accidentally create a future tax problem. Traditional retirement accounts come with required minimum distributions, or RMDs. Under current IRS rules, the RMD age is 73, for people born between 1951 and 1959, and 75 for people born in 1960 or later. That rule exists because traditional accounts are tax-deferred. You got a deduction on the way in. The money grew without annual taxation. Eventually, the IRS wants its share. That seems fair enough. The problem is what happens when someone spends decades doing everything right. They max contributions. They stay invested, they build a large balance. Then retirement arrives, and the account is so big that the required withdrawals push taxable income higher than expected. This is where many people discover something uncomfortable. Retirement does not automatically mean lower taxes. If you have Social Security, maybe a pension, maybe some dividend income, maybe part-time work, and then large RMDs on top of that, the tax picture can get crowded fast. In some cases, that higher income can also push retirees into higher Medicare premiums through IRMAA surcharges. The original promise of take the deduction now, pay less later, starts to break down if later turns out to be a high-income retirement. So no, traditional 401ks are not bad, but tax concentration can be. And this is your first pattern interrupt. More retirement money is good, but more retirement money in only one tax bucket is not always good. That distinction matters. Second situation, when your income is still rising. The second situation shows up much earlier, especially for people in their 20s, 30s, and early 40s. If your income is still rising, a traditional 401k may not be the best home for every new dollar. This is one of the most misunderstood parts of retirement planning. A lot of early career workers assume that because they are saving for retirement, traditional automatically makes sense. But traditional contributions only clearly win when the tax rate you avoid today is higher than the tax rate you expect later. That is not always true. If you're early in your career, there is a good chance you are in one of the lower federal tax brackets right now. If your income grows over the next 10, 20, or 30 years, you may look back and realize these were the cheapest tax years of your adult life. That is exactly why Roth contributions can make so much sense for younger workers. You pay taxes now while the rate is lower, then get tax-free growth and tax-free qualified withdrawals later. And even though Roth options are now common, people still underuse them. Fidelity reported that more than 94% of employer plans offered a Roth 401k option, but only about 16.2% of eligible participants actually contributed to it in mid-2025. That gap matters because the math can be powerful. Picture someone earning $60,000 today, steadily climbing over time, and later landing in a much stronger income range. If they spend their lowest tax years stuffing everything into traditional accounts, they may be postponing taxes from a cheap bracket into a more expensive one. That is not a crime. It is just a bad trade. And this is where a lot of ordinary workers deserve more empathy than they usually get. Because when you are trying to make ends meet, a current year tax deduction feels emotionally comforting. It feels like relief. It feels like proof that you are doing something smart. And sometimes it is smart. But sometimes that comfort is leading you to optimize for this year's tax bill instead of your lifetime tax bill. Those are not the same thing. Third situation, when you need liquidity more than another tax shelter. This one is huge, and almost nobody talks about it with enough respect. A lot of people do not have a retirement problem first. They have a fragility problem first. If you have less than a month of expenses in cash, carry credit card debt at brutal interest rates, or feel like one car repair could wreck your month, then sending every extra dollar into a retirement account may be financially impressive and emotionally reckless at the same time. You cannot build peace with money if every emergency turns into a crisis. So here's the adult version of the order of operations. Get the full employer match first, if it exists. That is still hard to beat. Then build real cash reserves, not fantasy reserves, not $600 in good intentions, a genuine emergency fund. Then attack toxic debt, especially debt with interest rates around 15% or higher. Then, if you qualify, consider an HSA. For 2026, IRS guidance sets HSA contribution limits at $4,400 for self-only coverage and $8,750 for family coverage, plus the usual catch-up rules at age 55 and older. HSAs are powerful because they offer tax-deductible contributions, tax-free growth, and tax-free qualified withdrawals for medical expenses. Then build flexible investing capacity outside retirement accounts if needed. And here's the money psychology moment most people need to hear. Liquidity is not laziness. Liquidity is what stops one bad week from becoming a 5-year setback. A person with a smaller retirement balance and a real emergency fund is often in a healthier financial position than someone with a bigger 401k balance and no cash buffer. Fourth situation, when you want to retire early. If you hope to leave full-time work in your 40s or early 50s, access matters. Most retirement accounts still impose penalties before age 59 and a half, with limited exceptions. The Rule of 55 can allow penalty-free access to your most recent employer's 401k if you leave that employer during or after the year you turn 55. But it does not solve every early retirement plan. That creates a simple mismatch. You may have money, but not usable money. A taxable brokerage account can help solve that problem. It has no contribution limits, no age-based lockup, and no penalty for withdrawals. Yes, gains may be taxable, but flexibility has value, sometimes enormous value. If you want to retire at 48, money you cannot touch until nearly 60 is not your bridge. It is your later stage support system. You still need a bridge. Let's make this painfully concrete. Imagine a 34-year-old worker named Daniel. He earns $68,000 a year. His employer offers a 4% match, so he contributes enough to get the full match. Good move. But beyond that, he keeps forcing extra dollars into a traditional 401k because he's been told that maxing retirement first is always the smart move. Meanwhile, he has $9,000 in credit card debt at 22% interest. He has less than 1 month of expenses in cash. His car is aging. Rent just increased. He is stressed constantly. On paper, Daniel looks disciplined. In real life, he is financially upside down. For Daniel, the smartest next dollar after the match may not belong in a traditional 401k at all. It may belong in debt payoff, cash reserves, or a Roth bucket that gives him better long-term tax positioning. This is why personal finance gets personal. The right answer depends on the pressure points in your actual life, not on generic advice that sounds wise in a headline. Fifth situation, when your 401k plan is bad. Some plans are excellent. Low-cost index funds, broad choices, reasonable administration, institutional share classes. Others are fee traps. The U.S. Department of Labor has long shown how damaging fees can be. In one example, a starting balance of $25,000 growing at 7% annually for 35 years ends around $227,000 if fees reduce returns by 0.5%, but only about $163,000 if fees reduce returns by 1.5%. That 1% fee gap cuts the ending value by about 28%. That is not a rounding error. That is decades of lost compounding. So if your plan is expensive, the logic may be simple. Take the match, then consider sending additional dollars somewhere cleaner, like an IRA with lower cost funds. Sixth situation, when future Roth conversions are part of the plan. If part of your long-term strategy is converting traditional money into Roth money during lower income years, then overfeeding the traditional bucket now may be inefficient. You might save a little tax today, only to pay more tax later on a larger balance with years of growth attached. That is why tax diversification matters so much, not because it sounds sophisticated, but because flexibility creates options, and options create control. Someone with all their retirement money in traditional accounts has less control over future taxable income. Someone with money spread across traditional Roth and taxable accounts has more ways to decide what to use, when to use it, and how much tax pain to trigger in a given year. That control is not theoretical. It affects real life. It affects retirement withdrawals, health insurance decisions, Medicare costs, and how much peace you feel when the market is volatile. For 2026 planning, the IRS has set the basic 401k elective deferral limit at $24,500. The normal catch-up contribution for many workers age 50 and over is $8,000. And for ages 60 to 63, Secure 2.0 allows an enhanced catch-up of $11,250. IRA limits are $7,500, with additional catch-up for eligible older savers. But contribution limits do not answer the most important question. They tell you how much you can save. They do not tell you where your next dollar should go. And that is the entire point of this conversation. The winners in retirement are usually not the people who followed one rigid rule for 40 years. They are the people who kept adjusting, people who understood that saving is not just about discipline, it is about placement, timing, tax treatment, liquidity, fees, and matching your financial structure to the life you actually want. So if you are a middle-class worker trying to build a future from not much money, here is the message I want to leave you with. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to max everything. You do not need to copy what works for a higher income household with totally different pressure points. You need to stop putting money on autopilot and start asking one question with brutal honesty. Where should my next dollar go right now? If the answer is your traditional 401k, great. If the answer is Roth, great. If the answer is your emergency fund, also great. If the answer is wiping out debt so you can breathe again, that can be the smartest move on the page. Because building wealth is not about looking sophisticated. It is about reducing regret. And the truth most people learn too late is that the biggest mistake is not always failing to contribute. Sometimes the biggest mistake is contributing blindly, year after year, to the wrong bucket for your real life. If this gave you a clearer way to think about your next dollar, don't just nod and move on. Go look at your own accounts, your debt, your cash buffer, your employer match, and your tax situation. Then make one better decision this week. And if you want more clear, practical finance psychology like this, stay with the channel. Because the people who change their financial future are usually not the ones chasing hype. They are the ones willing to understand the math, face the psychology, and make one better decision at a time. Thanks for watching.